Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be sharing a requested video of how to draft an inbuilt corset slash bas corset with a deep neckline yoke. If it's your first time viewing my channel, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So here is my pattern, and I've gone ahead to mark out all my vertical measurements, which includes my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, my shoulder to waistline, and also will be including the top length later. Next, I'll be marking my shoulder divided by 2, and I'm going to mark. So I'll also go ahead to add ½ inch because we're going to add sleeve to this dress. From there, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant or shoulder slope, and I'm going to place my ruler and I'll go ahead to draw. So next, I'm going to find the chest line, and to do that is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches, and I'll go ahead to draw a straight line. So whatever I have on the shoulder, I'm going to measure it at the chest line, and I'll mark, and I'll go ahead to place my ruler. I'll connect to draw a straight line. So after drawing that straight line, I'm going to be dividing what I have into 2. So from that part, I'm going to mark and I will come in by ½ inch. And at that point, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. So I'll go ahead to place my French curve, and I'm going to connect from my chest line down to the ½ inch, and I'll connect it upwards too. After connecting, I'll go ahead to use my marker to draw it out and also outline the shoulder. So I'm using a standard 3x3 neckline. So next, you're going to mark your dart intake, and I'm going to be coming in by 3.5, which is my nipple to nipple divided by 2. So I'm going to go ahead to mark a straight line. So I'll be extending this line later. So from that point, I'll mark 1 inch dart at the waistline, and I'm also going to mark at the under bust. So what I'll do next is to go ahead to connect a straight line joining the marks that I have made, and I'll go ahead to draw it out with my marker. After drawing it out, I'll extend it down to my chest line. So normally, if it's a regular corset, I'm just going to come down and I'll draw my curve. But for this particular part, first I'm going to determine the neckline or yoke area of this corset. What I'll do is I'll just go ahead to divide what I have here into 2 like this, and I'm just going to mark. So from that point I marked, I'm going to connect it down to my chest line. So next, you're going to determine how high or low you want your cup to be. If you want it to cover very well, you can go ahead and use 2 inches. But if you just want it something moderate, you can just use 1.5 inches, and you're going to mark at this point. So first of all, you can just decide to sketch out the type of neckline you want or the yoke part of this dress. And looking at the thumbnail, it is below the under bust. So at the under bust, you can go ahead and go down by 2 inches or 1.5 inches, and you'll be coming in by half. So for now, I'm just going to sketch out the neckline or the yoke that I want at this part. So I'm just going to draw it out, and at this point it's not too straight. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead to use my ruler to make this part straight. So after that, the next thing I'll do is to mark my dart intake at this part, and I will mark 1 inch. From that 1 inch, I'm going to go ahead to connect it down to my bust line this way. Now, to draw your cup at this other side, you're going to measure what you have from this point to this, and you're going to divide it into 2 this way, and you're going to mark. So from there, I'm just going to connect it down to that part of my chest line. So next, what I'll do is to place my French curve, and I'm going to connect from my under bust down to my bust line this way. And after connecting it, I'll turn my French curve the other way, and I'll go ahead to draw my cup for the other side. So this is what I have after I'm done drawing, and what I'm going to do is just to go ahead to outline it so that it will be more visible for you to see. So please, at this point, if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So next we'll be working on the other side of the cup, and I'll go ahead to mark 1 inch that, and I'll connect it to that point down to my bust line. So after marking that, I'm just going to blend it out. So I'm going to go ahead to place my French curve, and I'll connect from my under bust down to my bust, and after connecting that, I'm going to connect from that line from the side down to my under bust on the side also. So with this, my cup part is ready, and I'm going to label this as yoke. So next I will be extending all my measurements. So right now this is a requested video, so I don't know if the person wants to make this dress as an inbuilt corset or just with a dress with a basque. So I'm going to extend my measurement to 22 inches. So for an inbuilt corset, you're going to use 22 to 26 inches depending on the height of the person. So I'll go ahead to just extend all my dart intake at this point. Also on this corset, I'll be showing you how to just draft a basque corset or also an inbuilt corset like I said, and I went ahead to label my cup as A and B. So next I'll be inserting my bust circumference divided by 4. After marking that, I'm just going to go ahead and measure the dart intake I have at this point, and you're going to replace it. Then you go ahead to mark your sewing allowance. So after doing that, at your under bust, you're going to measure your under bust circumference divided by 4, and you go ahead to measure the dart intake. You're going to replace it and mark your sewing allowance. At the waistline, so I'm going to show you the easiest method of snatching your waist. If you don't want to calculate it, you can, if your waistline is 28, you can simply remove like 2 inches from it. 28 minus 2 giving you 26, and whatever you have, you're going to divide it by 4 and you're going to mark. You go ahead to measure the dart intake and you're going to replace it. So remember, whatever you use at your waistline, that will be the waistline of your skirt. So going down to this part, I'll measure my hip, mark the dart intake, and I will add my sewing allowance. So after now, what I'll do is just to go ahead to connect all those lines, and I'll also go ahead to outline my pattern this way. Now if you want to make your dress a basque and not an inbuilt corset, you can go ahead to go in by your sewing allowance at your waistline so that your waist and your back waistline will align. But I will have to cut out this pattern before I will do that, so that this point will align. If not, I'll have a different line at that point. Before I cut out my pattern, I'm just going to label it and I will cut it out. After cutting, this is what I have, and I'll tape the lower part together. So starting from that line, I'm going to go ahead to place my ruler and I'm going to go ahead to draw. So with this, if you cut it out, you're going to have a basque waistline. So I'll go ahead just to cut it out in case you want it to be a basque waistline. So this is what I have after cutting out. And also, if you're doing an inbuilt corset, you're going to be going up by 2 inches from the waistline, or 1.5 inches. So I'll place my tape at this point and I'm just going to go ahead to mark 2 inches, and I'm going to connect it back. So this is for someone that wants to make this an inbuilt corset. That's what you'll be doing. So the first part we did was for a basque corset. So I'm just going to cut this out, and this is your inbuilt corset. So right now we'll be moving over to the back pattern. So moving over to my back pattern, this is what I have. I've gone ahead to mark all my vertical measurements just like I did for the front part. So what I'll do is just to go ahead to mark my shoulder bust plus 1 inch. But I made a mistake while marking this, and I just marked my shoulder to under bust. So I'll still be correcting it from that. So next you mark your nipple to nipple divided by 2, and you're going to draw a straight line. So this particular pattern does not have a zipper, so I'll mark ½ inch at this part, and I'll go ahead to connect it down to my waistline. Back to the under bust area. So just like I said, it's supposed to be shoulder to bust, but I didn't realize I was actually marking shoulder to under bust, but I'll correct it later in the video. I'll go ahead to outline my dart. So next I'll extend that line down to my chest line this way, and I'm going to go up, mark ½ inch, and I'll connect it with my French curve down to that point. So after marking this, I'll go up and mark 0.3 inches at this point, and I will slant it down to my chest line. So why I'm doing this is just in case if you're going to have an excess at the back, this will take care of it. The yoke part of your dress, so I'll just go ahead to outline it. So you can go ahead to cut out your darts, or you're just going to blend it in this way. So I'm not making use of a zipper, and I'm going to create my lacing bar. So I'll mark 2 inches at the upper part, and at the lower part I'll mark 1.5 inch or 1 inch. So you can go ahead to just use 2 inches directly. I just want to create like a V design at the back of the dress. So I'll go ahead to connect it. After connecting it, I'll go ahead to outline my pattern. So after outlining it, I'll just indicate the parts that has the eyelets of this particular pattern just this way. So just like I said earlier, I'll be extending my dart to my shoulder to bust plus 1 inch. So I've gone ahead to correct it. So I'll just go ahead to connect it this way. Please don't be confused. I'll be taking all my measurements starting from the end of my or the beginning of my pattern paper. So I'll mark my bust circumference plus my sewing allowance, mark my under bust circumference. So this is optional because the back does not have a bust, so I'll just use what I have at my front. I'll mark it. Go ahead to mark my dart intake, and I'll mark sewing allowance. At my waist, I'll also mark the same front waistline I used, the dart intake and the sewing allowance. And at the lower part, I'm going to mark my hip circumference, the dart intake and the sewing allowance. So right now, if you're using a basque waistline, your pattern at the back is supposed to stop at the waist. You're going to stop here. But unless you're making it an inbuilt corset, that's when you're going to stop your pattern at the waistline. So you're just going to connect it from that point to the under bust and down to the waistline. So this is if you're making use of a basque corset, like the front part. I showed the basque and the inbuilt. So this is a requested video, so that's why I'm doing this. And after doing that, I'm going to go ahead, place my French curve, and I'll connect it down to the waistline this way, and from there I'll be coming up by 2 inches just like I did for the front, and I'm going to connect it down to the lower part. So next what I'm going to do is to go ahead to label my yoke, and after labeling it, I'm just going to cut it out. Before cutting it out, you can decide to blend in your dart and cut your back as one piece, or you can just cut out the dart and add your joining allowance. So I prefer cutting out my back as one piece this way. So if you blend it, you notice that this is what you'll be having at the back. So after that, I'll go ahead to cut out my pattern. So after I'm done cutting out, this is what I have and this is what my back looks like. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. Don't forget to hit on the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for supporting my channel.